Satnam Yogis and Yoginis, hello and welcome. Welcome to a new course on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. This is a classical text. We could say that is the most relevant or the most significant text for any yogi and yogini who are serious about the practice and about getting to know the philosophy behind that practice. And it's considered like the father, the father of many other philosophies and teachings that will come afterwards. And there will be all sort of philosophical lines that are going to be drawing inspiration from this text. So it's a very, very significant text, the Yoga Sutras. And I believe every true practitioner should read it. And unfortunately, this is not what I see nowadays. Very often, I find myself even in the teacher trainings that teachers, the students who are becoming teachers generally read the summary in the manual and that's it. Maybe during the training, it's talk about it for a little bit. Maybe some details are more talked in detail, like the 8 steps of Ashtanga or the yamas and the niyamas in detail. But otherwise, the rest of the text is ignored. And I think that's a pity. And I would like to explore that today. So I have been wanting to do this course for a while. And I think it will be a very light introduction on the Yoga Sutras. Mainly because I am not very experienced in it. I myself have only been a few talks where somebody would take some sutra and then explore it in detail. And most of the time, whatever I have received from the Yoga Sutras has been reading from my own self, reading different versions, meditating upon them, and trying to find a relationship between those versions of the text and my experience through other texts that we have, more modern texts. So everything that I will talk about will be my experience reading it. And so I think a good way to do this will be to actually read it. So we will go through different versions of the text and reading. When I say different versions, I mean different translations, because the Sanskrit text is just one. That's it. And then there's many interpretations of it. Now that's one of the first things why this is so great that we have this jewel. One, we have the original text, we have the original Sanskrit, and this text is so old. It's we are not sure exactly how old it is. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali could be written between 500 before Christ and 300 after Christ. So imagine that's a 800 years range, more or less. But it's not even that important when it was written, because the text that is written is something that might have been transmitted orally before. And some of the teachings of yoga are thousands of years, and I mean, it could be 5,000 years before Christ. Now, of course, writing didn't exist back then, so we would say that the first time that it is written, that's when we have these 196 aphorisms, the Yoga Sutras. And why it would become so important? Because the moment you write it, you can communicate it to others and other schools, and inspiration can be drawn from that. So when we talk about the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, Patanjali is generally considered somebody who's not an inventor of this. He's more like gathering different ideas from different traditions, and some traditions may speak. One will speak of Shiva, another one of I don't know, Brahman and Krishna, and different branches and different subsections of the Hindu pantheon, let's say. And he will say, well, let's gather everything, because humans are like one experience. Having a human experience is just one experience that is universal to anyone, no matter what your religion, let's say, and what God form do you adore. So he would incorporate all these teachings and universalize them and made a synthesis out of those and write them down. And that would be so significant that he would be able to synthesize all that in such a way that it's universal, and no matter who is your God, let's say, you can feel identified by that. And I say this, who is your God, like this, because whichever name you give to God is just one expression of this God. God is just one, is universal, but there's many faces, many ways in which God can manifest. And so that's why we have Brahma and Vishnu and Shiva and all these different forms, because they are giving us a different aspect or a different quality or virtue of what we represent, that is the divine. And yet, when you read the Yoga Sutras, you don't find any of those. You don't find that he's telling you, bow down and call Ganesha 3 times. And he's not saying this. He's just impersonal and universal. And maybe that's why it stood the test of time. And today we still find this text like probably the most important classical text for yoga practice. I mean, there are other supremely important yogic texts and philosophy texts, like the Bhagavad Gita, for example. But Yoga Sutras is like kind of when it's more set and more precise, more concise, more scientific, if you wish, details on how to achieve this concept of yoga, which is why it's called the Yoga Sutras. Now, because this is an introduction to the Yoga Sutras, and some people, maybe it's your first time getting into contact with this concept, then I think it's worth mentioning what yoga is as well. Yoga, the word yoga comes from yugyo, and that meaning to unite. The root is to unite, to join, to merge. And so yoga can be many things. It can be a merger of many things, but generally the final objective of yoga, the final understanding of what this yoga means is when we, as our personal, small, let's say, singular identity of consciousness, a small personal identity of consciousness, merge with the universal, the divine consciousness. It's like finding union with the divine, finding union with God, uniting with God. That union is going to take several steps, it's going to take a number of things, and those different steps will also explore some form of union. Like, for example, body, emotions, mind, and spirit. We could say that that's some sort of union that you have to find a proper alignment and a synchronicity between these different aspects of yourself. We could say that there is a union between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain, which operate in a very different way. And a lot of the things from yoga are serving to connect both hemispheres, and that's a form of yoga, a form of union. I have a video on this as well in the course on the mind, if you wish to learn more about that. So yoga is about union, and it's about union with the divine. And Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Patanjali tries to step away from giving any particular image representation of the divine and just say, well, it's just the divine in universal terms. So that's what yoga would mean. And this book, as I mentioned, is like the core, the father of many other texts that would come up later on yogic philosophy. But when I say yogic philosophy, I have to clarify one thing, which I think I haven't done yet in this channel. This channel is all about yoga philosophy. But philosophy, the way it is understood in the West and the way it is implied in the East is very different. It's quite different. In the West, philosophy is something that it could be understood as a thought exercise, as an intellectual exercise in which we are philosophizing. We are thinking about universal concepts, about truth, about justice, about world, about empathy, about whatever, morality. And then we discuss them, we talk about them, we we reflect upon them, possibly meditatively, but it's actually an intellectual thought. So when we go into an intellectual discussion of who I am, that's very different from the experience of who I am. And that's very different from the path that I have to do to get to the experience of who I am. However, that's the Western perspective of philosophy. The Eastern perspective of philosophy is quite different. When we talk about philosophy of yoga, it's not just to have an intellectual discussion on the topic, but it's actually about an experience, how to achieve that level of experience of union, or that level of experience of liberation. These concepts that we could very easily intellectualize them, it's actually about experience in Eastern terms. So I am Western myself, but I've been seeing yoga since I was a baby, very little, and so I'm exposed to this concept. But there is a challenge that always I will fall into the intellectualization. So I have to be very careful that we approach it in a way that it is practical, that it is something that we put into practice in our lives. So the way we will approach this Yoga Sutras, hopefully I will be reminding myself constantly to remember this is a practice. This is not something to intellectualize. So this is the way my intention to approach the topic, and my intention was to read together, and just reflect upon what's the meaning of that. How do we connect it to other teachings? Now, I mentioned I'm far, far, far away from having any kind of expertise on this topic. I am not a Sanskrit scholar, and I am not. I'm sure there is plenty of university courses that are in the Yoga Sutras, and I don't go into that detail, but why don't we learn from those who have the experience, and we read what they said, and then we explore our own interpretation of that. And look, because I haven't had any formal education on that, maybe I can give some fresh outlook, hopefully, into the different aphorisms. I mentioned this word aphorisms already twice. So the Yoga Sutra is a collection of 196, which is very, very little. Aphorisms. The word aphorism basically means some concise explanation of some sort of general truth. It's there's plenty of aphorisms in English, like how do you say that? Like actions speak louder than truth. Sorry, than words. Actions speak louder than words. So that would be an aphorism, and that it's a sentence that contains some universal truth that could be applicable to anyone, and it's precise, it's concise, it's kind of like a little bit of wisdom, contained in that. So the Yoga Sutras are 196 of these concise beds of truth, and we call them beds because it's the word sutra. I mentioned what yoga is, but I didn't mention what sutra. Sutra is like a thread. You can think of the thread of a necklace. And the sutras would be just the bare thread, unadorned, with no decoration. And then over these 196 sutras, the idea is that you would have a teacher who would explain them to you, and you would explore them and experience them with a teacher. It was written in such a way that it is highly interpretable, and so it would be the job of the guru, with this guru-chela relationship, kind of. The guru would be explaining to the chela what the meaning is. Now, in modern terms, we don't consider ourselves gurus, we are just teachers, but again, it's like I would allow myself to just explore what other teachers have said and explore with my own words what this could mean. So this unadorned thread, the sutra, we are going to be putting little pearls of wisdom, little pearls of teachings that we can apply to our lives, and they can improve how we experience them. So that's the idea of the sutra, like a thread. You can think of it like a necklace, or you can think of it like a mala. Yeah, it's like a necklace that you can have many bits and you can meditate on them. Generally, a mala has 108. Maybe we can find 196 for this one, but it's like a little jewel out of every aphorism that we can find in the book. So I mentioned that it was highly interpretable, and one of the reasons why this can be highly interpretable is, first of all, because it's in Sanskrit, and Sanskrit is already like that. And the language of Sanskrit has a way of talking about things that it can describe many things. So if we say that thing which grows from the ground, that could be a lamppost or it could be a tree. So things that grow from the ground can be many things. Or I don't know. There's many examples where you can find one thing that, as the way it is talked about, the description of that, it describes the function, it describes the way it works, and that could apply to many other things. So when you're reading the words, there's many possible meanings to those words. That's why it's highly interpretable. Also, I believe the Tao Te Ching is also kind of like that. The Chinese different characters can also be interpreted in many ways. And for the Yoga Sutras, I believe there was even at some point in the history of yoga competitions where they would check who is the yogi who can give the most number of interpretations, and some could give 15, 20, 22 different interpretations for every aphorism, and that's kind of funny. I think that you would find yogis competing. I see them almost like in a bar, like, and this as well, this means also this, and oh wait, because this also means that, and having this sort of fun, having fun competing in who interprets the aphorism in a different way. So one of the reasons why it can be interpretable is because of the language is Sanskrit. Another reason is because it's not just Sanskrit. It is very, very highly compressed Sanskrit. And if you look at the 196 sentences, I believe there is only 4 words that are verbs. 4 verbs in 196 sentences. So imagine, if there is no verb, that means you have to kind of sense what is he meaning, right? So when I gave the example of the aphorism, actions speak louder than words, if this was like a Patanjali's aphorism, he would say actions louder words. And then you're like, oh, actions why are louder than words? Okay, speak louder than words. Okay. And then you would extract some sort of meaning from that. So we will find that there's only 4 verbs. That's hilarious. I find it hilarious. But because I don't understand Sanskrit, it may be difficult to identify the verbs. But if anybody knows which are the actual 4 verbs that are in the aphorisms, I would love for you to please write it in the comments, because I would be very interested in. Because if there is only 4, why those 4? There must be something important about those 4. So I would love to know that. So we're going to find it's Sanskrit, which is many meanings, and it's only 4 verbs, so everything has been compressed. Now, the concept of compression is a concept that I am especially interested. The field where I come from is computer science. I was an engineer, and I still am an engineer, it's just I don't practice that anymore. But while I was doing the degree, I remember we had a course on compression, and we had to even build our own compressor, and that was a fascinating thing to do, because I never knew how you could get a file and compress it and then uncompress it and get the same file. And there is what you call lossless compression, and then there is compression in which you lose information. So you have a text, you can compress it, and if it's lossless, when you uncompress it, you have the original text. Or you compress something, and then when you uncompress it, you lose some quality. For example, with the images, in the internet, you will find like JPEGs. You take an image, a picture. Let's say I take a picture of nature, but that incredibly high resolution that you can take with an analog camera, you cannot put that into bits, ones and zeros. You have to reduce it somehow. So you choose what is the resolution of the image. So maybe 800 by 600. Okay, so I compress this whole image to 800 by 600, and then I apply a number of mathematical formulas that is going to make it very small. The file becomes very small, so JPEGs are very small. But by doing that, you lose some information. So when you uncompress it and you try to expand the image, you will see that there is little pixels or there is some noise in the image. Okay, a little sorry for going off track, but I hope you followed that little off track trip. So, what is compression in text? Well, first, there could be a loss of information in the moment that you are compressing something, but in the case of the aphorisms, they are actually becoming more universal. And let me explain what that means. If you look, okay, let's do it like this. If I throw this pen, you see that it falls down, right? So you could memorize, wow, if I throw this red pen, it's going to fall down. Do you know what? If I throw a green pen, it falls down. That's interesting. Okay. If I throw a purple pen, it falls down. All right. And you could memorize, imagine that in your experience, in your mind, you could memorize every single thing in the world that you have ever seen in your life, that when you throw it, it falls down. You can see babies when they are very small, you would put something in their plate, like eating, they are sitting for eating, and then they grab it and they throw it. And they are experimenting. It's like, wow, it falls down. And you can see the awe in their faces, and it's almost like, Daddy, did you see this? It's falling down. Look, are you noticing this? This is very important. And you are like, why are you throwing all the food to the ground? Eat the food, But they are like in awe for something that they have discovered. Well, what is happening there? This discovery, this learning that is happening, it's actually compressing. So if I had to memorize in my mind every single thing that I throw and it falls down, my brain would be filled with just examples of things that happen, that every time I throw something, it falls down. How about, rather than having to remember every single thing that falls down, I can compress all those experiences into any object that I let go, it falls down. I mean, it will have some exceptions, like some balloons, right? But let me first create some sort of law, some sort of rule that says, when I throw something, it falls down. And that's a form of compression. And that's useful for the brain, but it's also useful to convey some universal truth. In this case, it's gravity. So objects fall down. And then if I have to explore different objects, different sizes, and how fast do they go down, and many, many other things, I could be, again, trying to build up a model of why the things fall down until I would come up with Newton's law. And then it's like, oh, so there is gravity. And then you have a simple explanation of gravity and how gravity works. And that's another level of compression. There is gravity. So if I just communicate the concept of gravity, the law of gravity, then you will have received some compression of incredible amount of examples in your brain. And that law, the law of gravity, it's an incredibly intelligent way of communicate a learning, something that has been learned. Now, when you get that, and I tell you, I'm going to throw this green pen, you don't know if green pens fall, but you know that all objects fall and you know about the law of gravity, so you will know what's going to happen when you let it go. It's going to fall. So I don't communicate all the experiences I've had with pens. I communicate gravity. And that is the power of compression. And that is how compression helps to identify the most intelligent aspect of an experience, extract something from that, learn something from that, and then being able to apply it and adapt it to new situations. That's the definition of intelligence. So I learn something and then I apply it to new situations. This is the Yoga Sutras. Okay, this is what the Yoga Sutras are saying. Look, we're going to be compressing all these sayings from all these other gurus and teachers that are around India in this time. Let's imagine Patanjali doing this. He would be like a machine. He's really like a machine. And taking all this and compressing, being able to identify the common element in all of this. So all what these guys are doing, they are talking about this one thing. It's called gravity. Let me just talk about gravity. Don't let me give all these examples. And so he writes one sentence. There is such a law as gravity, right? We will read some of those sentences where there is just the final law compressing a lot of experiences and intelligently compressing the essence of those experiences, something that we can learn and we can apply. Actions speak louder than words, right? So it's not just words. We are talking, but this is the nature of YouTube. This is what we are doing. We are talking. But can you take those words? Can you compress them into your brain and then find a way in your experience, in your life, in which you can apply those words and manifest them? And that will be the objective of this course, let's say, to be able to receive, unpack, decompress some of these aphorisms, maybe recompress them again and decompress them and explore different angles so that we can identify how does that apply to my life so that we can apply it, and then actions speak louder than words. So something like that. So this is what we're going to be doing with the course of the Yoga Sutras. The book, the Yoga Sutras of Patañjali, is comprised of 4 parts, or padas. And it's a Samadhi Pada, which is the first part where Patanjali tells us about the final objective of yoga, what we want to do. We want to get to this Samadhi, and there is a description of what this state is. Samadhi being union, being the same Samadhi, sama, yeah, is uniting, and so we will explore in detail. The first and the second chapters, padas, are the most precise. The other 2 are more esoteric, maybe. I'm not sure whether we will go into great detail on every aphorism, also because I don't have that much experience with them, but we will definitely do at least the first pada, maybe the first 2 padas, because the second one is also very important. The first one is the Samadhi Pada, the second one is sadhana. Sadhana is the practice. So that's a critical one where he's going to be telling us what is the proper practice to get to that state that we want to get, to that Samadhi state that we want to get. So we will explore that. Then comes Vibhuti. Vibhuti it's a strange chapter on powers and cities, occult powers, that may develop as a result of the practice. And we may explore that, but we will see when we get there. It's very far away. And then there is Kaivalya, which is the liberation stage. So there's the final chapter will be on the liberation. I don't know how long will I make these videos. I don't know how in depth we will go through them. But my idea was, let me just do some meta explanation. We have been doing courses on numerology, and before that we were doing a course on the mind that I thought it was very necessary before we went into the Yoga Sutras. And I've been wanting to explore the Yoga Sutras for a while, but we needed to create first some common language that we can talk about. So now we will, when we go into exploring the different Yoga Sutras, we have that language already. So my intention is to kick off this course. We're going to have videos this whole week. This is the first week of September 2024. And I just came back from the holidays. For the last weeks, I could record very little, only one video. But I was part of me preparing for this kicking off. We will continue with the numbers course, but not right now. We did the number 7 and number 5. We will go into number 1, but not yet. We will do a little bit of Yoga Sutras, and then we will see when we start doing the number 1. But yeah, for this week, we're going to be doing quite a few videos, maybe every day, from Monday to Friday, a video on this. Today was the introduction. Tomorrow we will start with the first, and who knows how many, maybe 2, maybe 3, or 4, 5, I don't know. But I suspect that I'm going to be slow. I tend to speak a lot, and I enjoy just reading it, and then let's see what arises within me. Naturally, I haven't taken too many notes for this. It's just we will kind of improvise in the moment, and let's see what flows, what happens in the moment. But that's my intention. So thank you for watching this introduction. And if you're watching the recorded video, maybe you can already see the next one, and I will put them all in a list, so you can in a playlist, so you can watch them all in a row. Thank you for watching, everyone, and thank you for everyone who supports the channel, every member who is contributing to make these things possible. If you appreciate it, you enjoy this content, I invite you to click the like if you liked it, and share it with others, and subscribe yourself if you don't want to miss these videos. So until next time, for me will be tomorrow. Sadnam.